The definition of privatisation is the transfer of a business, industry or service from public to private ownership and control. Britain's rail network was first nationalised by Labour Prime Minister Clement Attlee in 1948. It was privatised by Sir John Major and the Conservatives in 1993. Labour are proposing to reintroduce British Rail in a bid to renationalise the train service completely. Some argue that privatisation has led to inefficiency.
I don't think privatisation actually works to the benefit of either the country, the infrastructure, or to passengers. It's actually a very inefficient way of operating what is essentially a monopoly, and every service is interrelated, is linked, and you cannot look at areas as being discrete areas for markets, which I think is the way that the privatisation model was expected to work. So not just simply for the passengers, but in terms of investment and making the network efficient and be better for our economy and for our communities. I don't think the model works at all well.
I'm not satisfied at all with the way in which the railways function. I always think it's ironic that we are a country that virtually invented the railways, had a very big network of rail services, and today we struggle with the most basic issues of punctuality, customer service, the number of cancellations, and so on.
Okay, well, let's look at those words, public, private. They're very, very different words. And in my view, the minute public becomes private, it is no longer public. Now, when we put that into context, public service, in this case, the rail service, can that rail service, which is public, ever become private?
Now, I accept that our rail services were allowed to run down and that investment is now being put in, but it's not going well, basically. And ironically, the rail services are very popular indeed in terms of the number of people who use them, but that, of course, adds additional pressure.
Back in 1948, we're talking about decades back, culturally we was in a world where if I wanted to go from A to B, my immediate thought would be bus, tram or train. There was no question of that. The public service, first and foremost, was to provide a service for the majority, the public.
In a YouGov poll taken in May 2017, 60% were in favour of nationalisation. The infrastructure, which is the track, stations and signals, is currently run by the government. There are 25 privately owned franchises who have power over the trains themselves. Railtrack went out of business in 2001 and Network Rail, a non-profit organisation, took over the railway infrastructure.
I think that rail franchising in itself is a perfectly feasible and reasonable way of running the railways. However, it isn't working in Britain in terms of the way it's done at the moment.
Privatisation has led to upgrades and modernisation. The political statement is that things have gone well with privatisation.
I'm old enough to remember the days of British Rail many years ago, and we have a very good service here in Rugby. We've got Virgin, who operate the intercity services, very important for many of my constituents who want to travel to London to visit, and a large number who are commuters into London on a daily basis now, and then London North Western, who provide the local and regional services. So I think, yeah, we do have a good service here, and I'm pleased that that's the case.
The necessity for the state to take some of the burden by running the infrastructure alongside private train operating systems has lifted some of the tension caused by previous underinvestment.
work. Of course, the infrastructure remains in government ownership, and we've been fortunate to see some good investment in that here in Rugby. We had a new station that was delivered around about 2006-2007 as part of the West Coast Main Line upgrade, and that's made a significant impact on impression on people coming to Rugby. A much more attractive station and better facilities for the passengers.
The private industry has invested in new fleets of trains and they have doubled the amount of passengers. However, the railway is heavily dependent on government support. Last year, the government invested £3.3 billion in the network, down from £3.8 billion a decade previously. This money went to Network Rail. The original idea behind the nationalisation of trains was that British Rail would assist the government and the economy as a whole. The necessity for profit was desirable, but it has been difficult under privatisation to make sufficient profits to pay towards further investment.
Conditions since privatisation, from the driver's grade, I can only talk from the driver's grade, have improved considerably, and pay has definitely improved, and working conditions, as I said, have improved.
The thing is that both ways can work. The Japanese have proved that the privatised system works. The Swiss have proved that the nationalised system works. But they both have, while they're very different methods of doing it, they have the same ways of doing it in common, which is that it's all under the same body. They're heavily subsidised by the governments who have got the right attitude towards financing railways, and they just have the right sort of cooperation and management.
Every company have their different managements and control centres and different types of traction, and to give you an example, in BR days, if something went wrong, you would just get on a train and move it to wherever, because they all belong to BR. Now you have to have a different driver for a different unit. It's not a joined up railway. We can't even couple up to assist units from other companies, because you just can't do that sort of thing. So
it's a difficult one, really. I would say that if a government is seen to be assisting people's lot, by their daily travel and commute, that will attract people to vote for them. So, I say, very difficult question. I must admit, in the early 90s, when the prospect of a private railway was sort of first aired, I was very anti, and right up until the point of privatisation, I was, quite vociferous about it. I didn't like the idea of it. To me, British Railways was sacrosanct. The railways were nationalised in 1948 because of the state that they got into under the private owners. And perhaps my initial thoughts were, it will be a exercise where shareholders would get richer and the public would suffer. With hindsight and age, I believe that the privatisation era has brought massive improvements to the railway system in terms of better services, better rolling stock and better conditions for the staff.
Having assessed all the arguments, it is clear this is a complex debate. There have been good times for the network through nationalisation and some great achievements with privatisation. Some criticise the state of the railways and others celebrate it as a great success. Where there is a complicated service to maintain, it is likely the system running shall have its critics. It is clear there are great things the railway service has offered to the people of the United Kingdom, and the future for the railway is bright, whatever the great rail journey as a whole shall endeavour to pursue.